Do you know what I love about reading a book? I mean, the smell, yes. It's getting completely lost in these imaginary worlds, completely made up from someone else's beautiful brain, and getting lost in that world and making friends with the characters in the book. But the thing that I truly love about reading is when I see myself in the book, when the book speaks to me, and it literally stops me in my tracks and shakes at my soul. There's an intimate moment in this book, small, but intimate. There's a lot of those moments actually, but this one specifically. If you've read the first book, Feyre doesn't know how to read or write, and currently in the second book, Rhys is teaching her. And she's at this point where she's gotten so good at reading that she can finish books now. And this is her thought in that moment. But Sarah wrote this for Feyre, but I feel like Sarah wrote this for herself, for how books make her feel. But I feel like Sarah also wrote this for the readers. This line is how this book, A Court of Mist and Fury, makes me feel. But it had filled my time, given me quiet, steadfast company with those characters who did not exist and never would, but somehow made me feel less alone. And that is exactly what this book and Feyre and all the other characters make me feel. This book has made me feel less alone, made me feel seen, and it's brought me so much comfort because I've seen myself in this story through Feyre's eyes, through her experience. And through that, it's also given me encouragement and hope and changed me and reminded me that I can do anything I want in life if I make the choice, if I make a choice. And I truly believe that books are a form of art and that they don't come alive until they've been pulled off the shelf. And we as the reader, we read them. And so then those words become imaginations, drawing inside our mind, feelings inside of like our heart. And we interpret it and we discuss it with our friends. So in a sense, we've made sort of this collaboration between the writing and the reading. We've merged them and brought the story truly to life. And then there's the critique and the review. Sharing with the author what inspired you, what you loved about their story. Thus, I feel like that honestly makes reading an art form. We, as the readers, become creators. And this book, it has inspired me to create. And I believe myself to be a storyteller. I studied acting for 10+ years, and I play Dungeons and Dragons, which is literally long form storytelling through improv. So now I wish to tell you a story with the help of Sarah. There are 3 quotes in this book that made me feel less alone, and I want to tell you why. And I didn't think eternity would be enough to fix me. This is one of Feyre's thoughts she has literally like in the first couple chapters. She's lying in bed for the millionth time after having the millionth nightmare about her trauma from under the mountain in the first book. This is her PTSD. She was a soldier, a savior. I mean, she literally saved the magical world of Perinthian, but at the cost of having to do 3 trials, and one specifically that is destroying her the most, where she had to kill 2 innocents. She had to look in their eyes, she had to hear them cry. She literally had to kill them and felt the blood on her hands. And when I read this quote, it hit me deep in the gut for so many reasons. One, because I ache for Feyre in that moment for everything that she's been through. I don't know exactly how she feels because I'm not in a magical world having to cure a curse and do awful things in order to save everyone for the greater good. But I know the feeling that she says in that quote. This sort of feeling of being lost in the darkness and feeling like everything's impossible. And it made me think about 2 specific moments in my life. One of those moments was when I was in high school. I was undiagnosed with ADHD. I didn't know what was going on with me, what was wrong with me, and it was a struggle because I felt like I was broken and had no answers, and I didn't think that there was any hope. I felt like I was literally just broken and I was gonna stay that way forever. And second is when my dad died over a year ago, and there's a lot of trauma around his death. It happened in the course of 6 months. It happened so fast, and there are so many circumstances and things that I felt I didn't have control over. I didn't emotionally know how to handle. And during that time, if I wasn't crying, my stomach was in knots. I couldn't turn my thoughts off. I had to fall asleep to YouTube videos, and even that wasn't enough. I would literally stay up to the point of exhaustion because my brain would just be putting everything on repeat. And I didn't know if I was ever gonna feel better. And when I read that quote of how Feyre felt, and you still are tied to that when you're working through trauma, trauma. It's kind of like a relief feeling like you're not alone, and it can give you encouragement when you see someone else working through it, even if they are a fictional character, because art is inspiring. It gives you hope. It allows you to see things in different ways that you didn't see before. And again, I also cried because no one should feel that way. And in good storytelling, it makes sense that Feyre feels that way, and it sucks and it's awful. It's a feeling of hopelessness. You're like in a dark hole. You don't see light at the end. And something that Sarah J Maas does, specifically expressing where Feyre is in life. She uses color or lack thereof. And if Feyre is seeing color or painting things in her mind, she has hope. She feels like she can live again. And if she can't even imagine how to paint something, when she sees things that are rich in color but she can't really imagine it, it means that she's no hope. She's down in that deep, dark hole where everything feels impossible. And so I feel like Sarah, in a way, painted this story through words. And when you finally see someone who understands how you feel, it's nice to know that you are not the only one. And also that someone could understand your pain for the first time and put it into words. It lifts you up. It gives you hope. There are good days and hard days for me, even now. Don't let the hard days win. Mor says this to Feyre. Feyre has left the Spring Court at this point, where Tamlin literally trapped her in a magical prison. And Mor was able to get Feyre out and break the magic and release her from this prison. And Feyre has been asking Tamlin constantly that she needs to get out of the house, that she is not doing well, and she needs purpose. She needs to do something. And I don't know about you, but whenever I feel like crap, if I'm able to do something and put my mind elsewhere and feel like I'm helping, that helps me pull me out of that dark hole so hard. And Feyre asked him constantly, and she also told him constantly how she was feeling and that she was drowning. Otherwise, she sat in that house alone, no one to talk to. But Tamlin believed that if she was in that house, she was physically safe. But he didn't bother to think about her mental state, which is more fragile for any person, I think. It was almost like he was okay with her emotionally falling apart as long as she was alive. And this line that Mor says to Feyre, it's because Feyre is saying that she wants Mor to meet her sisters. She wants them to hear about Mor's story and how Mor still chooses to be strong and kind to others. And Feyre does not know how to do any of that right now. Like, Mor was literally sold off to the highest male bidder because she had these amazing magical powers, and they're like, great, she'll make great offspring. And Mor's like, no, that's not my choice. I don't want that. And she found a way to make herself impure, but her family didn't care, and they literally stapled a note to her, physically stapled a note, nailed it to her, and dropped her off at the Autumn Court and said something like, this is your problem, deal with it. Now, I've never dealt with that, but I have dealt with people close to me hurting me, which has caused me to have a lot of trust issues and be very protective of the ones around me. But more specifically to the quote itself, this really hits home to my struggle and relationship that I've had with my ADHD. My brain can sometimes feel like a prison. Not as much anymore. I think now we play more tug-of-war with each other, but before I knew what was going on, and I also think when I finally found out I had it and was diagnosed, it still felt like that. The shame spirals that I would find myself in when I was struggling to balance my emotions, figure out how to manage productivity, they literally used to eat me alive, where sometimes I would be frozen. Like, physically, I couldn't move because I didn't know how to manage it or what to do. And then that would continue on to the next day and the next day. So I was letting those bad days win. And now I love those bad days, and I don't let them win. I work with them. I find ways to soothe myself when I feel it all creeping on. Everyone's gonna find what's best for them and what works. And something my therapist has taught me is about soothing yourself. I like coloring. I'm an adult. I like coloring in a coloring book, drinking some herbal tea, and listening to a podcast, a YouTube video, an audiobook, whatever I need to calm me and soothe me in that moment. And that is able to remind me that I have another day. And this isn't a bad day. This isn't a waste. It's just a journey, and it's a part of the process. With this quote, I loved it because Feyre's never had a friend, and I think this is really important for her. Everyone needs community and good people when you're going through a tough time, and having that reminder of not letting the bad days win is so important. And especially someone who does know your pain, who can really empathize And it was like Moore was friend to me in that moment, reminding me, sometimes we need the reminder, that even after all the work we do, we're still gonna have bad days, and that's okay. It's important to choose to not let them win. Remember I said talking about choices? To choose to not let them win and let the good days outweigh the bad, because there's so much beauty in the world. There's so many wonderful books to read that can help you and all the people in your life. So many things to see. Like I just went on a trip recently and I got to see Dublin and Edinburgh for the first time, and traveling and going to these cities and seeing things I've never seen before. It kind of reminds you, if you start to feel yourself crawling into those dark holes, why they don't deserve the power. You will feel that way every day for the rest of your life. You can either let it wreck you or you can learn to live with it. This quote is said during one of my top favorite scenes in the entire book. So Feyre is with her newfound family and she's training with Cassian. You know, he's teaching her how to do fighting stances. Big war potentially about to happen, and she needs to know how to fight. But I also think that they teach her to do this because I know many people have told me that learning self-defense, it really gets you in your body and helps you face your fears. So I think that was another reason why they told Feyre to train and do this. Remind yourself how powerful and how strong you are and how that physicality can rush through you mentally. She's doing the 1-2 punches, you know, trying to work through that PTSD. And she had just sent a letter home to Tamlin saying how she's not coming back, to not bother her anymore, and she needs time. That was a big step for her. So Cassian asks how she's doing. She says fine. She knows that's a lie. And she starts breaking down and talking about fairies that she had to kill for all of this and how it should have been her. And she just collapses to the ground, crying. How it should have been her, and through the punching, these new powers that she's still figuring out, she has burned through her gloves because of all the anger and pain raging through her. And Cass tells her it's okay. He knows, he understands, he's a warrior himself, and no judgment. And she falls to the ground, and Rhys comes up, wraps her in his wings and cocoons her. And I know about you, but like scientifically proven that like hugs with pressure like can help your nervous system a lot. And she looks up and she sees Rhys, and he says this to her. And I love it because she's not alone when this happens versus when she's living with Tamlin. He avoids talking to her about all of it because he thinks it gives Amurath the power, which no, it gives her more power by letting her win, by everyone crumbling. And so she hasn't had support system at all. And now Rhys is making sure that she always has support. Not having supportive or toxic people in your life is not helpful when you're going through a hard time. And you should be able to lean on the people in your life and talk to them about what you're going through. And I hate that Tamlin, there's like one point where he literally shakes her off where Feyre's trying to be there for him when he's having a traumatic nightmare and he doesn't want to deal with it. So I love that Rhys just gets in there and he's right there for her. My boyfriend and I, we were watching Guardians of the Galaxy. And if you've seen the movie, there's an opening scene where Peter is a little boy and mom is in bed and she has cancer and she's dying. And as the scene was happening, I was like, oh man, I think this is gonna trigger me. No, I'm gonna try to stay really distant. I'm gonna watch it, but like emotionally distance myself from it. But then it wasn't until after, as he's hopping to go into the cave and steal the thing, and he's listening to the music, and I started hyperventilating. And I started thinking about my dad, and him being sick, and just feeling helpless, and all that trauma just like came back in that moment. And my boyfriend was so good. He told me to breathe. He reminded me where I was, that I'm present, I am here, I am safe, and that my dad is no longer suffering, and really ground me and bring me back to the present here. And I think that's why this scene in this quote hit me so much, because PTSD can sneak up on you, even when you work through it. I mean, there's a later part in the book where Feyre tells Rhys that she is broken but healing. And I think that's very true. I mean, people have talked about how grief is just it's not a perfect circle, and you can also repeat it and all this stuff, especially if there's trauma involved in it. And so that scene, it's so normal and natural to break down when something triggers you like that. And it's part of the healing process. But also, she had people around her to support her. And that's what my boyfriend did for me in that moment, and he continues to do. And so with this quote, Rhys is telling Feyre, you're gonna live with it for the rest of your day, but you can choose whether or not it wrecks you. And we see that with Rhys, the choices he makes in life. Versus Tamlin literally shuts Feyre out. He won't talk about anything. He's so terrified if something happened to her that he'd rather lock her up and emotionally fall apart than actually sit down and have a conversation and face his fears. Rhys has the same trauma that they do, different things, but still from the same cause. And he works through it. He still has nightmares, but he doesn't let him eat him alive, destroy him. And there was a time there where I didn't know if I was going to get through it. But I was doing the work without realizing it. Going to therapy, listening to the things my therapist told me to do, and allowing myself to cry, and reminding myself that I did the best I could in that situation and I can't go back in time. And so all you can do is love yourself through it, work through it. And now sometimes I will dance out to some of my dad's favorite songs, cry, and understand that it's part of the journey, but I don't have to live in fear and it doesn't have to take control over me. Some moments are harder than others, so I work through them, but they're not winning. They're not wrecking me. And Sarah wrote a scene that was so real. That was, I was reading it for the first time, and when she literally just like fell apart. It just felt so real, like I felt like I was in Farah's body. But it was cathartic. I think crying is cathartic. I think it's healthy. You're working through your emotions, and so that scene was very cathartic for me. And you could say it was like a therapy session, and now I like really want to take kickboxing so I can be in my body. So this entire book is about Farah's journey through her PTSD, through her depression. Yes, there's a huge part that's a love story, but this is Farah's story. I love these characters, and I love the world that SJM has created. And I cannot wait to continue this series. I gotta finish videos for this book, and then I get to start A Court of Wings and Ruin, and I'm so excited. You honestly never know what you're gonna get yourself into when you pick up a book, and this book has changed me and helped me for the better. I personally think that this book is a work of art, and Sarah's tool is the ink to write the words. That's her paint. This is her painting. And thus, it's made reading a form of art. As I read this book, everything came to life for me, and it compelled me to share these things with you and why I think that you really should read this book. I truly hope you will read it and not listen to the internet. Show me a family of readers, and I will show you the people who move the world. I'll see you in the next one, guys. Thanks for watching.